Thank you so much for tuning in to Exit Ready. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. We're going to unpack ways for you to make your company more valuable so that when you get ready to exit, you can get the most money possible. Now to the show. Rick, it is good to have you on today. How's it going, man? Well, let me stay back. No. It looks like it's going great. So
it's going well. It's 75 here, sunshine. I'm living life.
I can tell. It looks amazing. For those of you who are listening, he's under a umbrella, got a beach hat on, a beach shirt, big chain, cigar, like living the dream. It looks like I'm talking to like the Godfather or something, like God, the Scarface. What's his name? The name I can't remember. That's anyway. So, give everyone a quick background of who you are and kind of what you do.
Sure. Uh, I've been exit planning since about 2015, and I really enjoy helping business owners plan for that transaction. It's fulfilling for me. It's very fulfilling for them. Prior to that, I worked for a few years at a university running the Small Business Development Center, and prior to that, I ran a consulting firm for about 10, 12 years in Colorado.
Yeah.
My background is manufacturing, supply chain, and I guess you could say consulting, since that's always a derivative of those elements.
Yeah, people ask me what I do. I say consultant. They say, "What's that mean?" I'm like, "It depends on why you're asking."
Exactly,
It
exactly.
depends on
Yeah,
the context, because as a consultant, you can do anything. And so, um,
yeah,
okay, so exit planning. Maybe let's unpack that term as well, because in my
absolutely.
experience, a lot of owners they want to know the value of their business, and then either it matches their expectation. Rarely does it exceed their expectation, but that does happen. Most of the time, it's not close to their expectation, and so they don't
Yeah,
sell. And what I've seen is a lot of people who say, "Oh, it's nowhere close. I'll go to market in a year or two." Don't understand that in a year or two, if they don't do the right things, it's not like the housing market. It's just not going to shift dramatically. And so in a year or two, they're going to get roughly the same valuation minus some small adjustments. That's what I've seen. Is that what you've seen?
yeah, and what I a lot of owners confuse exit planning with selling their business. I get asked a lot, well, do you help me sell my business? No, I don't. I don't help you sell your business. I help you get ready to sell it. Uh, I've always said that, selling a business is just a transaction, right? It's keys for cash. Exit planning is aligning your personal, financial, and business goals so you can exit your business, or eventually it'll be a sale, or it could be a transfer to to a family member, whatever. We'll just call it a sale uh, at some point. But it's not just your EBITDA. A lot of owners today are getting pretty smart on EBITDA, which I think is a good thing. But I mean, it's more than that. I always say the money's in the multiple, and the multiple isn't just something that pops up. And I mean, anyone that says, yeah, small business sells for X multiple, well, I don't think they really know what they're talking about. Now, true, you can derive an average from any group of numbers, but you can really impact your multiple if you get into a good comprehensive exit plan.
Yeah,
And
I love that because on one hand, people will say, "What's my business worth?" And I'll say, 3 to 7x, just kind of like that's the range, just more or less. But then that I think owners hear that they don't realize if you have $1 million EBITDA business, 3 to 4x is $1 million. 3 to 5x is $2 million. So like because we talk in multiples, it's like 3, 4, 3.5, 4.2. Like they don't realize that could be hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars you're talking about here. So it is. So you mentioned owners calculating EBITDA. That's interesting. I haven't noticed that trend. What I've seen is owners will calculate their EBITDA and it's almost always wrong. So I advise them not to calculate it and not to have their CPA calculate. Get someone third party who understands M&A to calculate it. Don't call me. I'm not gonna do it for you. Let's get someone who's great at it to do it for you. But But let that person do it, because this is, when we say 3 to 4x, it sounds like 3 to 4x, no big deal. You're getting 3 cans of soup or four. No, it's $3 million or $4 million, and so that's what I've seen.
Exactly. Yeah, and when I say, owners are getting smart on EBITDA, I mean they can at least tell you what it means. Whereas 10, 15 years ago, it was a lot of explaining and a lot of pushback from owners. But uh, what the approach that we take is, we tell owners that we can 90 days we can give you an enterprise value assessment. That'll include a an assessment of your personal, financial, and business goals. It'll which is really where we derive the risk component of it, and we'll give you a valuation, and then we will produce an action plan for you to how you can achieve your goals. I like to say the EVA is something that we tell you where you are now, where you want to go, and how you're going to get there. And that's typically our first project with any client, is helping them understand where they are now, figure out where they want to go, and how they're going to get there. It doesn't really, to me, it doesn't really matter what you sell your business for if you don't know if it's enough, right? So we spend an awful lot of time working with owners on figuring out what those personal goals are. We call it a life after business plan. Uh, Work with them to figure out what it is they want to do. It's a little extensive, but I think it's well worth it, because, like I said, if you don't know what you want, you don't know if your business is enough. So we'll start with that, personal uh, objectives or goals. Then we'll go down into the financial and say, okay, you know where you want to be, right? When all's said and done, this is the lifestyle you want to live. What's that going to cost? And we help them figure out how much money do I need to achieve that lifestyle. And then finally we look at the business and say, okay, in that financial piece, we look at what we call it a wealth gap. What's the difference between what it is you have now and what you need, not including the business, right? And then when we look at the business, we know what kind of gap that business has to contribute in order for the owner to reach their personal goals. And a lot of time, I don't remember when it was, but I was working with an owner who got a little exuberant in the risk profile that we were working on, and the valuation didn't support it. Uh, so he kept asking, well, what do I have to do with the business in order to meet that? I said, well, first we got to go back and we have to reassess what that risk profile is, because you're coming up into a category, a business peer benchmark of someone that's making $1 million more than you are in EBITDA, and that's going to be a huge red flag for you know for a broker, or an IB, or whoever you're going to help do that. So that's kind of how we approach it. We start the planning with personal, financial, and then business, and then the execution, of course, goes business to meet the financial to achieve the personal.
So I think a couple things there. Let's talk about the post-exit mentality, because what I've seen is owners will get so busy, then they go to sell, and they haven't really thought about the post-exit sale. they should have done the things in their business to relieve themselves of the business, which would make it more valuable, and they can start figuring out what they want to do next. Start a different business, focus on grandkids, travel the world, whatever it is, they can start that process if they build a more valuable company. It sounds counterintuitive, but if you remove yourself from the business and everything else stays equal, it's going to be more valuable. And then you can help figure out your post exit strategy and start dabbling around and figure out what you want to do. Because if you're 52 and you want to retire, there's only so much golf you can play. You got to do something else. And so it might be that you want to fix cars for a living, and not like an actual business, but you just kind of have cars that or whatever. And so that's kind of been my advice to owners. What would you say to that?
Absolutely. We call it a life after business. What are you going to do the day after closing? You know, uh, because to your point, you can only play so much golf. You can only travel so much. But figuring out what it is you're going to do. And I tell owners, look, we're not talking about a day planner for the rest of your freaking life. We're talking about a general direction here. You say you want to retire. Well, what does that mean? What does retiring mean to you? And, some business owners have rather, modest expectations, and they say, well, I don't need to work on my business much. I think I have enough. And, and I always tell them, your business is worth, potentially, you know, twice what you say you need. That doesn't mean you just stop now, because you now have an opportunity to get into some philanthropic work. When we were in Kansas, every county had a foundation, and they were always broke, right? So I would tell owners, look, why don't you take $500,000 and leave it to this foundation? Why don't you take another $750,000 and give it here? Do something good. And that registered with them. That really registered with them. So it's not just, you know are you going to the beach and sip umbrella drinks, or are you going to start a business? Those things are very possible. And I think the younger you exit, the more you tend to think of really some type of interim step, before you really close up shop. But knowing what it is you want to do in that next phase of your life, because you're going to have 8 to 12 hours a day that ain't full,
Yeah.
and
Well, and this goes back to kind of that gap you're talking about. So if a blind conversation happened, I didn't know the age of the owner, or any of that stuff, and they said, "How much does my business need to sell for me to be able to retire comfortably?" And I didn't know anything else about them. I would say, well, between 5 to 6 in the low end and maybe 15 to 17 on the high end. Now that's if you're in New York City versus the rural area, like there's a lot of variables in that, and obviously it can be less than that. That's true. To be higher than that, you really got to be living on the extreme. Like you really got to be living on the extreme. But that's kind of a safe range, I think. And most owners hear that, or they might hear that and go, "Oh, my business is worth $5 million," and that seems to become the problem. It's not. It's like, oh, it's not worth that 5 6 million dollars that you need. That's kind of my thoughts on that. Am I right, wrong? You disagree? Go ahead. If you do, feel free to push back. It's okay.
yeah. Well, uh, I mean, everybody wants to know what it's worth. What's my business worth? Well, a business is only worth what a buyer and seller agree that it's worth, right? So, you can play the kind of blind squirrel approach and throw a number out, see if you get any takers. If you get a lot of takers, you underbid the market there. But I I don't spend a lot of time talking to them about what it's worth until they, finish the valuation and the assessment, and then we sit down and we have a little workshop presentation on, here's what I'm seeing. And we talked about your life after business, and what it is you want to do. And I had one guy that wanted to travel to and watch at least one game at every major league baseball stadium. So he's like, well, a couple 100,000 ought to do it. And I gave him a homework assignment. I said, okay, this weekend I want you to sit down and take the first 10 stadiums you want to visit and start figuring out, how do you want to get there? You're going to drive, you're going to fly. You're going to drive, how many days that going to take? Where are you going to stay? And he came back and said, wow, this this little dream of mine's going to cost a couple bucks. I said, well, if that's what you want, let's get your business ready to do that. But I think that once they understand, the risk component that we develop for them, which is really where the multiple comes from, right? And we tell them, what their real number is. I like to kind of differentiate from that tax number that they probably see every quarter to, the real number, which is, an adjusted EBITDA, and tell them this is where you are today, and you know where you want to go. So you know what that gap is. Here's the profit gap in your business. Here's the value gap in your business. And here's the wealth gap that you need to close by, working these two levers of, attractiveness and transferability to get to where it is you need to be. And I found that when owners really kind of buy into that concept, they work a lot harder, and it's more meaningful for them when I tell them, okay, here we've been going through three 90-day performance cycles. You guys are still weak in this area.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked to your production manager, and he's a little overwhelmed. I think he needs some more resources. So if you want this to happen, I think you're going to have to help him out. And of course, I'm grabbing the production manager and saying, dude, you've got to ask for these resources. No one knows why you're struggling. All we know is you ain't making the mark. So let's get to it and kind of bring things in together like that. I don't know if I answered your question. I
No,
tend to rumble.
that's okay. No, I mean, I think what you're focusing on is if you don't know what you need versus what you think you need versus what you want. Like a lot of owners kind of have these numbers, and it's like, well, obviously we can't predict perfectly inflation and what might happen, but we kind of have some historical trends to look forward to. Um, yes, Elon Musk might write a check for your business, and it might be crazy because he just wants to spend money. But we kind of have some numbers we can base it on. We have all these things at our disposal. Once we kind of figure out, okay, um, to your point about the baseball. Okay, well, you what you want to do is this. This is going to cost you $700,000 a year. Just to put a number on it, and you are
Yeah.
52. The average life expectancy is going to be, let's say, 80. Like you can start doing this math, and that math starts to tell you, well, withdrawal rate of 4%, Social Security, all that stuff. And start going, okay, well, So you need to sell for X dollars at minimum just to kind of hit this. That's assuming there's no medical emergencies, there's no stuff like this, and without that number, I don't think owners really understand. To your point, that okay, they don't know that number, they might falsely presume that they have that built in now. And what I was asking about is if this blindly asked, someone blindly said, well, how much do I need to sell my business for to retire comfortably? I would say 5 to 15, $17 million. Now, I don't know their lifestyle. I don't know all those variables. To get to $15 million exit is really hard. Like you've got to have a really good company. To get to 5 million, it's not easy, but it's doable. Like that's much more doable. That's the top end of the SBA. A lot of people don't get there, but you said they work harder when they know it, what to do, and I agree with that. Once you know, oh, okay, I have to do this, and for some of these things they have to do, it's not as simple as, like I make a joke, it's an owner-dependent business, and the owner writes a new SOP. The owner's out of the business, and then like goes to market the next day. The buyer doesn't go, oh, well, he's out now. That's not how it works.
Exactly.
It takes
Yeah.
time. And so if we're saying if you're listening right now, you go, I don't know the gap, but understand you're going to sell for probably 5 to 6 on the low end, maybe 10 to 15 on the high end, depends on your age. All these things we don't know, but 15 is tough. Like that's really hard to do. You got to be a really impressive company. 5 is hard, but it's doable. And so I just think that you keep touching on this gap, and I love that because a lot of owners don't understand the gap. And what I've seen is I had an owner call me in 23, and he wanted to sell for $7 million. He wanted $7 million. It was worth two. It was worth two. And it's like, okay. He goes, well, I'm going to be the biggest company in Texas. Next year he called me and goes, hey, I'll take $1 million for it. And it's like, and then what he didn't do was actually take, he wanted seven. Okay, well, you can want whatever you want. But to build a $7 million company, you got to do these things. And he didn't do any of those things. And it backfired on him to where he would take $1 million and he was trying to get out in like 45 days. It's like, that's not going to work. And that's what owners, they play that risk. And the longer they're in the business, the less they feel that risk. But it happens more often than I think, at least in my experience.
Yeah, and the time horizon I think is important. Uh, if I had to say my ideal client, when do they want to retire? I say between 5 and 10 years, because it gives them enough runway where if they do have to make some, either serious life changes, some people get sick, right? Uh, if they have to make life changes, if they, you know, have to grow their business a little more in order to, meet that retirement number. I say 5 to 10. I probably do more businesses in the 3 to 5 year range than the 5 to 10. Uh, but the the thing that I think blows owners away is the how long does it take to do an exit plan? Well, my touch time on the exit plan is probably, maybe the average is 9 months, right? But I still say, the minimum is 3 years because there are things you've got to do. I mean, just going to a broker and getting it on the market, that could take a year, before you attract the right buyer. Uh, if you don't have that tax and estate planning work done, that could, depending on the complexity of it, that could take a long time. So, you know, I I try to I don't try to convince owners anymore that it takes longer than they think. But when I start showing them what to do, like our assessment, we have 3 pillars, 26 categories, and probably 149 value factors that we take them through, and from there we can say, all right, this is where we see this is the range of values we see for your business, because all businesses trade in a range of values. It's figuring out what those are, right? So we'll look at the multiples and apply the valuation to it, and show them where we think they are and where we think they can go with some work. And they're always just a little surprised at, wow, so I really can exit at a number that I want, but I've got to do all this upfront work within the business. Like, yeah, because you I had an M&A attorney friend of mine. We were talking about our assessment. He goes, "Well, let me take a look at it." So I showed it to him, and he's like, "This is like a reverse due diligence, dude." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, because if you don't know what buyer expectations are, everything you're doing is just a shot in the dark." So we have a pretty strong focus on that in the assessment, is figuring out, what do buyers look for? How do you look in the eyes of a buyer? And we break that out into, an attractiveness. what does a buyer think is an attractive business, and a transferability. How easy is this going to be to transfer ownership, and the buyer still get the value they see in it. So that's
Well, I love that there because what it's weird. We talk about a business buyer, but almost we should probably start calling them business customers because owners don't think of them like that, right? Because that is your customer, that is your client. And if you think I've got this great business, why wouldn't they want it? Well, why are more people not buying your service right now, your product right now? So you've got to understand that they are the client, the customer. And we call them buyer, but it doesn't really connect. And owners, and if you're listening to this, owners, and you're going, Ryan is hating on owners. I'm not hating on you. I'm trying to tell you, like, this is common. Like, you're not alone. This is how most owners think. It's so I'm trying to help you, like, understand that buyers are looking at you like any buyer would look at any product or service. Does this fit what I want? And they're looking at buying you for millions of dollars. So the risk is really high. And so it's one of those things to where you've got to really understand, to your point, here's 150 things, here's 300 things, here's 15 things. You've got to understand who you're going after and what do they care about, because what you care about might not matter at all to them. And so, like, you might think, oh, well, you mentioned the time frame to fix stuff. I was on a call the other day. Client has a customer concentration issue, and the M&A group advised him to fix it. You need to see new revenue from this customer to fix customer concentration issue. You got to fix it for 12, 18, 24 months. Okay, so a year to 2 years. So I asked the client, I said, well, how long is it going to take you to just get the work and, like, to fix this issue based upon the revenue and all that stuff? He said probably a year, maybe a year and a half. I was like, so it's not a year and a half problem. It's a 2.5, 3-year, 4-year problem that you have to fix, assuming that you do fix it in that time period. And so when you talk about this horizon, it kind of like, oh yeah, I'll just fix this stuff. Like, no. Some of these issues take years to work through if you want to capitalize on that value. To go back to your point about the gap, once you understand the gap, do you really want to capitalize on that or not? And so, yeah, it's a thing to where I've been trying to pound that home that the buyer is the client. You really got to understand what they want. And oddly enough, what I've seen is the better that you have your business set up, the better buyer you will attract, and the more they'll pay. Right? It's not like a
yeah,
discount shopper.
yeah. And when you said that, I had a flashback to my old consulting days. We used to call it Management Consulting 101. And I probably stole all this from Peter Drucker or something. But, who is your customer? What do they want? How are you going to give it to them? And just, go through that little playbook. And, who are your customers? Well, it can be an owner operator. It could be a strategic. It could be a financial buyer. You know, what do they want, and then understanding what each of those types of buyers want and what they're going to look at. And, an owner operator may not see something as unattractive as maybe a PE group would find it unattractive. So it's not, yeah, you're absolutely right. Look at them as a customer. Yeah.
Well, and you might have a better analogy for this because I've been trying to figure this one out. Okay, if you think about, and my people that edit my videos make fun of me because I use this all the time. You think about burgers, right? And I use this. It's like you can be at McDonald's and sell the dollar menu burger, and I eat dollar menu burgers, so I'm not hating on those. But that's just a certain clientele, people that will buy dollar burgers. If you're In and Out, that's a different level. If you're selling a burger at Roost Chris Steakhouse, right, that's just a different level burger, even though it might because that person might buy the $45 steak or whatever. The McDonald's customer, they might buy the Big Mac occasionally, but they're just going to spend that. So when you hear a lot of talk about how to get businesses for 100% owner financing and how to get all that stuff, that's a certain type of buyer. And if you're not set up well, that's all you're going to attract. What I'm suggesting is if you set it up right, those people can't afford you because you're not going to owner finance $4 million. You're going to have a well ran business that an SBA loan would be happy to lend on, maybe a buyer with cash. Like, and so to me, it's like, okay, you're trying to attract the right buyer, and when you do, they're not going to ask for 100% owner financing. If you have a weak business, though, they might ask for that.
Yeah. And, I think I piss a lot of people off when I say that, there's only three reasons an owner, should accept, a seller note, or I call it taking back paper.
Mm.
One is desperation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're desperate, you're going to have to take it back.
Mm-hmm.
Second is ignorance. You just don't know.
Don't know.
And
Yep.
third is a very well thought out and deliberate estate and tax plan that you can now formulate that owner financing and the schedule and all that. And what I try to do is I try to bump owners out of that SBA you know target. I like to get them well over $5 million because you you just have a different type of buyer. And I'm not saying that folks who are buying businesses in the $5 to $7 million range, and they have some money to invest, and there's a little owner finance. I'm not saying they're bad buyers, or it's a bad deal, but I'm on the owner side, so I like to explain to him or her, if it's less than 20, I think it's 20% owner financing, you don't get paid for 2 years. If it's 20% or more and they've got an SBA loan, you're not getting paid till the loan is satisfied. So is that really what you want to do? And I've had probably two or three, not a whole lot, but two or three clients over the past 10, 15 years where they did see the value of a well thought out seller note, and they could survive the gap, and take payments that would eventually get them to where they needed to be. And just something just kind of flashed in my mind. uh, I have said that if a business isn't ready to grow, it's not ready to sell, because buyers don't want to throw 8-10 million dollars into a business, and then they've got to put in another 2 or 3 million to get the business ready to grow. That's just a non-starter with buyers. So it would be a non-starter for me, and I'm sure it would be a non-starter for you. But you have deep pockets, so man, maybe that's not a.
If I have 8 to 10 million laying around, banker, call me because I'm shutting it down now. I'm good. I'm good. I don't need that much. I'm good. I can live off that. But well, on the owner financing thing, because it's interesting. I talked to an owner last year, smaller
Mhm.
business. It was an archery shop. Really good dude. Really liked him, and he'd sold his previous archery shop owner financing. Okay, and he was looking to sell this one on owner financing, and it was only a couple $100,000. It was a small deal, and I can't remember what the last one was for. But the last one, the guy, the new owner was in default. Well, he couldn't make the note. The new one that that's the new one, the one he's trying to sell now. It's like, well, I told him, like, well, the problem here is you are the business. Like, he had no help. He had a good business. It was good for like a one person shop, but he was an expert in bow and arrow and all the stuff, the string. Like some dude called him from like Minnesota while I was there, and he starts breaking down all this stuff, and I was like, man, you know everything, which is great. The problem is your customers expect that level of service, which means the new buyer, when they come in, if they don't know like you do, they're gonna go somewhere else, and you're presenting kind of a unique thing here because I think we're getting like an academy in town, and people will go to buy a bow and arrow from academy, but the people who want his level of expertise will still go to him. But the new buyer, if they don't have that, and so there's the other end of the spectrum where he's done owner financing, not really a fan of it, but he kind of has to do it because he hasn't built out a great business. But also, what's kind of under the table there is he's built a business because he's such an expert that it's going to be hard to replace him. And so if you're building out a business and you become the hub of knowledge, it's like, yeah, someone might be foolish enough to do that under owner financing, but really they're not going to be successful, which again means you aren't going to get your check. And so that's I've seen that as well on the smaller size deals.
Yeah, and you know, I've seen it a lot. I mean, I just have a soft spot in my heart for some of these craftsmen who it's maybe them and you know an assistant or just them. I had one client. He made custom saddles, and when he was first telling me about custom saddles, I'm thinking, I don't know, that maybe this is not the right client for me to work with. And I went to his shop, and I'll tell you what, he made some gorgeous saddles. And it wasn't just for the cowboy who was running a couple horses. It was for world class performers and riders, and he was getting a pretty penny for it. But we did talk about, because those kind of businesses, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be owner financed. They have to be. And I've worked with owners where uh, they maybe find the right buyer, but the buyer's not bankable. So you've got to figure out how are you going to transfer the equity, so when that proposed buyer gets to a point where he has enough equity in the business to become bankable, and maybe he's saved up some money, and that can work a lot of different ways. Uh, you'll find a you'll find somebody that's willing to finance them for that, and those are tough. Those are time consuming, but that's most. I mean, the reality is that's most of the businesses in the country.
Oh
Are
yeah, I'm with you. I have a soft spot for them as well. It's one of those things where it's like again, someone called. He's not shipping bow and arrows across the United States. People come to his shop, and some dude from I think it was Minnesota, somewhere up north, called him, and he's sitting there answering all the questions, and super knowledgeable. It just becomes the next buyer. And for him to compete with Academy Sports, I don't think I have, if I was advising him, a real fear, because people are coming to him because they want to know like the intricacies of. I don't use bow and arrow, so I don't. I'm not one, but they want to.
Yeah,
I'd go to Academy to buy one. I don't care. But people who come to him, they want. They're serious, and so to your point about this guy with the saddles, like people, if world class horse riders are buying saddles from this guy, that's serious, right? And so the next person, they might not be able to finance it, but they also have to understand that the expectation of the clientele is different there too.
yeah,
And so that also makes it hard, because if you're owner financing, the new person has to have that same charisma, that same craftsmanship, all that same stuff to make
yeah.
sure the clientele feels taken care of. And that becomes a different issue than just the financing part of it.
Absolutely, because as we've seen time and again, the owner is the business, right? Uh, and if you're gonna transition that business, you've got to find another potential. And that's why I kind of like that mentoring model, where you know you find what the owner considers the right person, someone that's got the artistic skills, somebody that understands leather, somebody that understands horses, somebody that understands the different types of horses. But you find that person, and then you can work with them, and a fair piece of it is going to be seller financing, but you work with them over the court, and it's not like, okay, work with me for 6 months and it's yours. It's over the next 3-4 years, we're gonna help you fill my shoes and get you familiar with the client base, so you can successfully operate and grow this business. Yeah,
And I'm glad you brought that up, because in this case, I talked to him, I guess it was like July or August last year. And I say last year, maybe it's this summer, past summer. Yeah, well, I guess it is last year now. We're in 26. So, yeah. So, so sorry. Yeah. So, last July. And he's like, well, I want to be out of the business by December because slow season starts in January and the new owner can figure that out and go from there. I'm like, no, 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 no. That's not going to work. That's not going to work. You're going to have your busy season and you need to have the buyer for that season so they understand what's going on. And then you guys show them how to live through slow season, and then probably go through another busy season again. Like you just can't say, hey, the slowest time of the year is January, February, whatever it was. I'm out of here. Figure it out. Like that's just you might. And we talked. I made a joke earlier about Elon overpaying you. So that's not going to happen. But you might find someone who would take a risk on an owner finance deal, assuming it's not really personally guaranteed, stuff like that, for something like that, because it's a low risk for them. But if it's a low risk for them, it's a low risk of you getting your money back. And so if you are in that business, to your point, you got to have this plan of 3, 4, 5 years to transition it, or you got to understand I'm not going to sell this thing. I've got to invest in stocks or real estate or whatever it is so I can retire that way. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, just understand that's what you're doing. And I think a lot of owners, they're in the spot to where they should be investing in stocks and real estate, and they think they're going to sell, and they don't do, and they don't invest in stocks and real estate enough, and then it's not worth what they need, and then they're in a bind.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because even some pretty attractive, high revenue, high EBITDA businesses, you get into the owner's personal savings and investment portfolio, and they haven't looked at it since college. It's like, well, I put some money in here, and I don't know where it is right now, but that's a critical piece of figuring out what that wealth gap is, right? It's the what you have and what you need, and the bigger the gap the business has to fill, the harder it is to to really get there. uh, you know and I when I give presentations and things, one of the things I like to leave owners with is you have to have a personal savings and investment portfolio. If you don't have a financial planner right now, you need to get one because you know life and retirement can be really nice or it can suck. And if you don't have a fair amount of money of your own to contribute to that retirement, you're getting closer to the retirement is going to suck because now I'm totally dependent on what the business is going to bring. And you know who knows where that is right now.
Well, I do think the thing that's good for owners is a few things. One, the M&A market, if you just look at the historic trends, it's bigger than it's ever been before. There's more buyers out there, which means it's not like the housing market, like we said, but it is better to sell your business today than it was in 1995 or 2005. It's just better. That trend will, on some level, continue. I don't know if the growth will continue, but the amount of buyers will, at least stay here more or less. Probably will grow. Which also means that if you're a younger owner, then the opportunity to sell is there now too. If you have some of these numbers, you're there, you're ready to sell. But I think the thing I'm most encouraged about is that younger owners, I think, understand better than older owners. They can sell their business, and then the planning that you talked about, they kind of understand that because there's so much education out there now about this stuff.
Yeah.
Where if when I got started working for my dad's company in 2005, six, whatever it was, you could get audiobooks probably. Maybe I don't know if Twitter was even around, but like the amount of stuff that was out there, podcasts, maybe around. I don't even know. The education just wasn't there. Well, now you can go find it anywhere you want. So this next generation of owners has the potential to be better educated, whereas the previous generation, the boomers as we call them, I understand why they are where they are because unless you kind of caught this trend and caught this education when you grew up, this wasn't even really a thing people talked about. You read about it in the Wall Street Journal. Oh, Exxon and Mobil joined together. Cool, okay, but it didn't really apply to you. So I do think that trend is positive for owners in general. What's your vibe on that?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. The the internet and everything that goes with it, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, podcasts, it has truly democratized the M&A process. Before, like when I sold my first business, I didn't know what I was doing. And all the big M&A players, that was their secret domain, right? You're not breaking into this. But yeah, buyers today, well, sellers are getting a lot younger owners are a lot more intelligent about the M&A process. And the flip side of that is buyers are much more sophisticated than they were 10, 15 years ago. And they're bringing in resources that you know even 10 years ago, you wouldn't see on a deal less than $70 million, right? So it's very competitive, and I think smart buyers and smart sellers, when they come together, that's a huge win-win-win.
I'll just, I don't know if you watch sports a lot. Are you a big sports fan?
Yeah, a
A
little
little bit. Well, you get into
curling and
sports.
track and field.
Okay. Well, okay, track and field. Track and field is probably a little bit of a hard one just because Usain Bolt. I don't know how many people are going to beat him over and over again. But in sports in general, you will have a coach who will come to a team and they'll come up with a new system, and all of a sudden that system just dominates because people haven't seen that, and then everyone else does it, and it kind of levels out. Well, right now, the influx of buyers is good for owners to start hearing, oh, I've got to have this, I've got to do this. And so 20 years from now, it will be more common if you want to build a sellable business and you don't want the lifestyle route. It'd be more common to see these things. But 20 years ago, why would you do that? I remember when I was younger, you mentioned the first time you sold the business. When I was younger, my dad owned his own company, and he told me, it doesn't really make sense for me to build the business more because it's just more headaches and I don't make that much more money. Because selling the company wasn't even in purview. And so I started to run the company at some point, and we got called in by a competitor, and they were trying to go public. And so, like, hey, we're trying to go public. We want to buy up all of our competitors and then go public. That's our strategy. Cool. What's your EBITDA? And we're like, well, our EBITDA, that's a great question. And so we called the CPA from the car. This is like 2008. I don't know, something like that. We didn't know what EBITDA was. Never even heard that term. And to your point about owners now, it's like, yes, you start to hear these terms. Now, calculating it, I got my concerns about this, calculating it, but they do hear the term. And so the trend is heading upwards. And the problem with like calculating it, just to delve on that for a second, is CPAs who haven't dealt with M&A don't really understand what's important from an ad back perspective and all this stuff. And so they're not really worried about that. And so they're going to be more educated. And so it's just going to be a better spot. Now, I do have a question for you. M&A. For so long, it's been a private thing. Like, it's super secretive right to the end. And I think that's actually a condition of what we've experienced in the past, not the expectation in the future. Humans are humans. We're still going to like consistency. But I think some of the secrecy around M&A will go away the next 10 to 20 years because owners will start to realize, wait, I've got Rick. He's really important. I'm going to give him a bonus. So if I sell, he stays on. It helps me get an earn out or whatever it is. Rick, here's why I'm getting this bonus. It's tied to this. We're valued here. We get to here. We're going to sell. And that's just going to be commonplace for the smart owners who want to sell and understand that gap. To get that gap, they've got to push their people, maybe hire people, and they've got to do things that it doesn't make sense to the employees. I got a great job right now. Oh, I get an extra couple $100,000 if I help with this. I'm on board, right? And so I think that's where the market's actually heading. And the old school kind of brokers are like, no, no, let's keep everything hush hush. Right now, that's where we are. I get that, but that's not where I think things will be in 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that it's almost like good exit planners should work on putting themselves out of business by educating owners and getting them smart and getting them to the point where they understand these things. Uh, I and I think there needs to be kind of a reshuffling in the broker world too, uh, because brokers typically aren't in the business of helping you improve your business so you can sell it at a higher multiple in 2 years. They're looking for, and I did brokerage, in the past, so I get it. Uh, you know, you'd rather have a little money now than a lot more in 2 years, because who knows what's going to happen in 2 years. But getting business owners smart on the whole transaction process, I see it as a good thing. And it's going to be tough, but I see it as a good thing, because just going to the IRS definition of fair market value, a knowledgeable owner, a knowledgeable seller. Well, you've got to have that holistic knowledge to
Hmm.
really be able to do that. But yeah, it's I'm impressed with the the buyers I see having discussions with former clients of mine. I'm
Hmm.
very impressed with their level of knowledge, and I think we tend to front load uh, the business owners, the you know prospective seller, enough that they're at a par with them. Yeah,
Hmm.
unless it's like a PE group or something. I
Yeah.
mean, they'll typically over over everything. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I agree with what you said.
Well, the final point there, and we'll wrap up with this that you made is a great point. If you call a broker or an M&A advisor, it does not mean this is not a slight at them. Their job is to tell you if you go to market now, this is the value of your company. And if you like that number, they take you to market. That's their job. And a good one will go get you that offer. So it's worth 10 million, they got you offer for 10 million, you're happy. There's nothing wrong with that. But also
No,
understand, but to your point, to also understand that's not the same as saying, well, it's worth 10 now, you need 15, here's how you get 15, and this is how long it's probably going to take, this is the process, these are the levers you got to pull. That's a different process. So if you go to a broker and you go, well, the broker said it's worth 2, I guess I got to sell for 2. Well, if you want to sell for 2, you can. If you're done, you're fed up, you're tired, then sell for 2. Cool. But if you need 5, then that's just a different process, right? And so understanding everyone's function in the game, and I think a lot of owners, they're like, oh man, I don't want to pay for this and pay for this and pay for this, and it's like, guys, there's millions of dollars on the line here, and what I tell owners, and you might laugh at me for this, but I tell them, if you pay me 500, assuming this is the right size business, that caveat,
right.
you pay me $500,000, I will get you two. I will tell you to get $2 more million when you sell, and they'll say, well, I mean, what if it doesn't work out? I'm like, right. That's what a buyer's going to think when they look at your business. What if it doesn't work out? I mean, exactly. Exactly. And I'm not blowing smoke. I can tell you what to do to get $2 more million. Can you do it? I don't know. But I can tell
Yeah,
you. And so if you want a buyer to pay you millions of dollars, but you won't pay $500,000, well, what do I have to prove to you to make sure that you feel like it's worth $500,000? Well, I got to prove a lot, a whole lot. And me and you know that it's one of those things. It's like, well, it's doable. Whether they can do it
yeah,
or not, it's a different question. But it is doable. It is doable. But I love using that analogy to help owners understand when we're talking about why buyers aren't valuing what they expect. Well, pay me $500,000 and I'll tell you how to fix this. I'm not paying that. It might not work out. Right. You've now answered the question. And I am dead serious. If you have a business that's doing, I don't know, we'll say $1 million EBITDA, maybe two, I don't know, $1 million EBITDA at least, maybe 500,000. I don't know. Anyways, I can do that. It's not that I'm a genius. I just know what has to be done. So pay
yeah.
me $500,000, and no one's taking me up on that. I wonder why.
Well, I'm stealing that, just to let you know. I'm stealing that because
Okay.
I spot on. But I don't know. I think there are a lot of owners out there that will see that value proposition and
Mm-hmm.
understand it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, he can get me 2 more million. Yeah, that's really 1.5 million, but that's 1.5 million. You know, that's you know that's a good deal. That's a
And
good
that's what I
deal.
told that. That's what I said. Like it is a good deal. It's a 4x, right? It's a good deal. And the reason you won't pay that, and I'm not being disparaging, I get it. You won't pay it because you're afraid if it doesn't work out. And that's what buyers. That's how we've got to think of the buyer. They're afraid if this thing doesn't work out. I paid $2 million for this. How do I make
Yeah,
sure I get my money back and make money? And so our process is trying to help you make them feel safer. Because if you knew for sure, like it was written in stone, like God came down from heaven and wrote it on stone, you're gonna get $2 million, you'd write the 500K tomorrow. You wouldn't worry about it. But you're worried because it's not proven enough for you. And I get that. I really do. I understand that. But I understand that's what buyers are going to think as well. So we're trying to take that out of the equation as much as possible.
exactly. It's different sides of the same coin.
Yes,
You know.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Rick, I've enjoyed this. It's been great. I'm jealous of where you're at. It looks amazing. It's about to be like minus 47, like Fargo, North Dakota, here in Texas tomorrow. So you look like you're living the best life. So where can people find you, connect with you if they got more questions? What should they do?
Yeah. Forward Focus is the name of the company. You can find our website, forwardfocusplanning.com, because I didn't want to pay $250,000 for forwardfocus.com. So it's forwardfocusplanning.com. And my email is rick@forwardfocusplanning.com.
You didn't want to pay $250,000 because you couldn't. That's just a great analogy. Like it's everywhere, right? Once you see it, it's
Yeah.
everywhere. And the reality is, you probably wouldn't have made a couple million bucks off of focus.com or whatever because it's just not how it works. But it's just it's how buyers think about stuff. All buyers in all spots always think about this. And so
Yeah.
I love once you see it, you can't not see it. So man, it was so great to catch up and look forward to talking again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. And, let's get out there and add value.